This episode of the Device Talks weekly podcast is brought to you by Device Talks Tuesdays. Join us 4 p.m. this Tuesday for a conversation called Nitinol Shape Setting Simplified. Uses, selecting a vendor, optimizing design, and prototyping is brought to you by Haraeus. It's been a very popular program. Be sure you're there. Go to devicetalks.com to register. All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Device Talks weekly podcast. Great to have you here. Very pleased to bring you a conversation I had this week with Geoff Martha of Medtronic. We reconnected. It's been a year, just over a year since he's taken over as CEO of Medtronic. So we covered a lot of ground. We talked a bit about where Medtronic and medtech is in terms of COVID, sort of wrapped up that conversation, I hope, at least in the US. Talked about vaccinations at Medtronic. We talked about his first year as CEO and what was he surprised by, or what did he learn about the role, and how is it different than running a business? What is what are the challenges that are particular to being a CEO? I thought Geoff had some great thoughts there. Finally, we talked about reorganization, Hugo, Mazor, and HeartWare. So it was a far-ranging conversation. Thanks, Geoff Martha, for joining us. I'm sure you will enjoy it. I certainly enjoyed the conversation. So before we get into that interview, though, I'd like to bring in my podcast partner, Chris Newmarker, the executive editor of Life Sciences, so we can review this week's Newmarker's Newsmakers. Chris Newmarker, happy Friday.
Happy Friday, Tom. TGIF. We're doing
Woo-hoo.
we're recording this thing on a Friday again.
That's right. This news is as fresh as it gets.
That's right.
Cannot get any fresher. And I know you don't have
fresher than buying those vegetables at the co-op. So
we are such suburban dads. Yes. Like picking up my share from my CSA.
That's right. What?
We are too cool for medtech. That is the truth.
What else could I make with these artichokes?
Oh, good. Beets. Yay.
Beets. Nothing like a good beet salad.
And more radishes. Fantastic.
Radishes. Rash sandwiches, you know. That'd be really highfalutin suburban. Like, I'm going to get some nice baguette and some organic butter and make myself some radish sandwiches.
So many people are pushing next podcast right now.
I'm done with these guys. I'm just done with them.
Fast forward 15.
They finally broke it. They broke it.
All right. I know you don't have a lot of time despite our ridiculous conversation.
Yes.
So let's get into the Newmarker's Newsmakers. Jeez.
Oh, my gosh. What a week. Anyway.
Number 5 on this vaunted list.
The vaunted list. You know, we got some good names on this list this week. Number 5 on the list, we got Abbott. They won a CE mark for their Amplatzer steerable delivery sheath, and this is kind of is developed specifically for minimally invasive left atrial appendage occlusion, closure procedures, to help prevent strokes. So this is just kind of like upping Abbott's stroke prevention technology, so we'll see where it goes from here.
So this is approved in Europe and Canada.
Yes.
And does it currently have FDA approval?
I believe it does not. Currently not approved in the U.S. So they're kind of moving for which is kind of unusual. I mean, these days, like usually you hear that something was approved in the U.S. and then approved in Europe, actually. But so, yeah. Well,
good news for Abbott. All right, let's move on to number 4.
Number 4 on the list, we've got Medtronic receiving an FDA approval for their Sensite directional lead system. This is for deep brain stimulation. So this should hopefully up the game with Medtronic's DBS technology. They could treat all kinds of movement disorders like Parkinson's, essential tremor, medical refractory epilepsy. So yeah.
Awesome. So let us go to number 3 on Newmarker's Newsmakers.
Well, number 3 was just a really cool enterprising piece by our pharma editor, Brian Bunce. It actually ran in full on mass device because it had such a medical device focus. But Brian talked to one of the top neurologists in the country based in Chicago. And, kind of talking about how, there really have been like relatively few tools over the years to help people who have migraines. But that's changing now. And it's changing not just with pharmaceuticals. I mean, there's some of these like monoclonal antibody treatments coming out, which are just like the big hot new thing in recent years in pharma, and also like, ramped up against COVID as well. I mean, we've seen those kind of treatments, brought out against COVID, but you're also seeing like, non-invasive neuromodulation that's coming out to help migraine, sufferers as well. So it's kind of like a really kind of exciting time for getting some better treatments out for, this condition that can be like very debilitating.
Yeah, no, I'm grateful. I've never really suffered from them, but they sound horrible and can really lower your quality of life. So certainly an important area to continue to work on.
So if you want to find out what's happening with, treating migraines, read that story. It's a really good roundup of what's going on.
Great job by Brian Bunce. And we should point out that the number 5 was written by Sean Hooley.
Yes.
Number 4 was written by Sean Hooley. Number 2 was written by Chris.
No, number 2 is written by Sean Hooley. Our associate editor, Sean Hooley, is a news story writing machine. He's just such a great asset for us.
I'm sure he's pushing rewind on the podcast button right now. I want to hear that again.
I want to hear that again. Before I head into my weekend.
Sean's all about that.
Yeah, Sean. No, Sean's actually like Sean's just a good solid guy. So
a low key dude.
Exactly.
What's number 2 on the new Markers Newsmakers list?
Number 2 on the list, we've got Amazon winning an EUA to sell its COVID-19 test directly to consumers. That's right. Amazon has of course they have a COVID-19 test. I mean, that makes sense. Dun, dun, dun. They already had a authorization, like an EUA, emergency authorization for the test, but this test is actually saying this can be like administered at home, and then you could, send in the specimens yourself. So, I mean, this is, we're finally, it really feels like, at least in developed countries like the US, we're dragging ourselves out of this pandemic. And now all of a sudden you can just like get a test on it. Amazon has a test you can just buy and take home and mail and stuff. But, oh, well, we got it now, right? We're getting them now.
Knock wood on that. I went to my first baseball game, post-COVID baseball game. Went to, as I posted on LinkedIn after talking with Geoff Martha on Monday, where he talked about really having to find ways to recharge on the weekends. I realized I hadn't done anything fun like that. So the next morning I went on StubHub and got a couple of ticks for $25 and went with my brother. And they got crushed, but it was good to be out there, and it felt normal, and it was nice. So,
I haven't followed it too close. Are the Red Sox doing as bad as the Twins? Because I mean, the Twins, wow. Minnesota Twins this year.
Yeah, no, the Twins are doing poorly. The Red Sox are doing very well.
Wow.
Surprisingly. I'm just now learning who the players are, which is unusual for me. We had a team of know-nothings and no one expected anything, but they're a game out of first place right now behind the Tampa Bay Rays, those evil Tampa Bay Rays.
But still not as dastardly as the Yankees, right?
We kicked Yankee butt over the weekend. Went on the Yankee Stadium and swept them.
That brings warmth to my heart. I've had so many years I've just seen the Twins like they made it to the playoffs and they're facing the Yankees like season over. Yeah,
that's always hard to watch. I always feel bad for the Twins.
It's not good. Some year, man, we're gonna get through New York. We're gonna do it anyway.
It's gonna be 1991 all over again.
Like Kirby Puckett will be smiling from above. It'll be awesome.
Let us hit the big number 1. This one was written by
me, by
Chris
yours
Newmarker.
Truly.
Yeah,
I did something that was like really cool. Like I try to do it all the time, man. I'm trying to do cool stuff all the time. But this story is about CVRX, neuromodulation device company based here around the Twin Cities. You've actually interviewed their CEO before.
Yes, we've had Nadim Yared on the podcast. Actually, he was one of the first people I interviewed, and I interviewed him January 2020, and we ended up using the podcast in April. Not that this is that important, but it was a good long podcast. And my point was it had taken so long for me to run it, I went and talked to him again so we could update it. And so he's actually been on the podcast twice.
Yeah, two in a row series with him. So people can go check that out, in our archives from last year. But anyway, their company, CVRX, is they're doing a good old fashioned IPO. They're gonna be trading on the NASDAQ under the symbol CVRX. They're looking to raise up to $75 million. So the economy is coming back when you start to see IPOs.
Yeah, no, it's been an exceptional medtech IPO season.
Yeah.
Kind of surprised. I didn't see it coming, but especially with COVID and the economic slowdown. But we're seeing NeuroPace gone out now, CVRX, all these companies that have waited a long time to reach this inflection point, and they're finally there. And they're doing well in the public market. So knock wood.
Yeah, and CVRX is interesting because it's neurostem, but it's neurostem to treat heart disease, treat heart failure. So I mean, just kind of a really interesting technology. So it's FDA approved. So we'll go an IPO.
Hey everyone, this is Tom. Before we get into this interview with Geoff Martha, I wanted to bring in Jonathan Wax. Jonathan is the Vice President of Quality at Flexan. Flexan was kind enough to step up and sponsor this episode of the Device Talks Weekly podcast. Jonathan, I understand Flexan has some exciting news from its plant in China.
Well, we're pleased to announce that we just launched the manufacture of a Class 2 medical device as a contract manufacturer in our Suzhou, China facility. It represents close to 18 months of taking a component manufacturer and providing them the resources and skills and training and equipment to launch a fully completed Class 2 medical device and enabling our customers to have product wherever they need it, whether it's in the United States or in China.
And during the lockdown, we saw a great strain on the supply chain, on bringing products in from outside the U.S. Jonathan, what does this do for Flexan?
What this enables us to do is to provide our global medical device manufacturers the capability to provide their patients and their customers with product around the world. And it provides them enormous flexibility where they can now come to us and manufacture product in Asia for their Asian markets or for export around the world or manufacture in the United States. And it's an important capability to be able to provide medical device contract manufacturing on a global basis. That's a requirement that as an increasingly global business, the expectations are that we should be able to support their product distribution and manufacturing strategy wherever it may be.
Well, that's great. Congratulations on the news. And thank you for joining us on this episode of the Device Talks Weekly podcast. For more information, you can go to flexan.com. That's FLEXAN.com. Well, Geoff Martha, welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I saw you on LinkedIn. This is kind of a softball question to start, but you posted a graduation a picture of your daughter. And I recall from our first podcast, you shared the story of how you had to break her heart and move her when she was 12 years old. It seems as if she recovered okay.
She has recovered. Yeah, it's funny you remembered that. Yeah, it was a difficult conversation to get her to move from Milwaukee to here in Minneapolis. Now things have dramatically changed. She's a happy college graduate, and she's moving back to Minneapolis here and taking a job here in the Twin Cities. And she's super excited. And her mother and I couldn't be more thrilled that she's going to at least be in the same town as us. So it's good times for us.
I can imagine. I wonder, I've talked to a lot of executives. A lot of them have moved in medtech and other industries throughout their career. That's not likely ever to go away. But do you see any meaningful changes to how medtech is working post-COVID? We're all sort of seeing maybe that moving isn't a necessity, that relocation might not need to happen. Do you see any lasting changes to how what would corporations require of their executives?
Yeah, I think it's been changing, Tom, over the years, I'd say. I mean, I grew up in GE and back in the 90s, it was, you get to have a conversation with your manager. Well, we're thinking about this job in Oregon. And, I go home and talk to my wife and say, look, let's get the house on the market, and there was no question. We just moved, right? And over the last 15 years, I think that's, people have been finding a little bit of more of a work-life balance, and companies have been a little more flexible. But I do think after COVID, it'll be interesting. I think that flexibility will increase because of technology, and I still believe that this hybrid idea. It's some sort of combination of face-to-face, and you can use technology for part of the time. So I don't think you can lead a team remotely, especially in an R&D environment, an innovation environment, full time. You need to have some face-to-face, but I do think there'll be more flexibility. There'll continue to be more flexibility around remote and virtual.
Interesting. Yeah. No, it'll be interesting to see how things develop. So we've let's just hit upon COVID for 1 second. I listened to your quarterly call. In that, you suggested or declared that, at least in the U.S., we seem to have moved past the COVID impact. Is that a fair assessment of what you said?
Sure. It's not 100% back yet for every therapy, but, by and large, we're getting really close. And some of our therapies in the U.S. were even above pre-pandemic levels, right? Mm-hmm. And others are in that 85%, or more. And even our more elective cases, or more elective therapies or procedures are coming back. So I think the U.S. is very close to being fully back, fully returned.
And how are you managing OUS? Obviously, it's in various stages and some horrible stages in some companies and markets. What is Medtronic doing to support those businesses outside this country and help them do the best that they can, and obviously to weather this pandemic storm?
Well, I think, first of all, in some of the emerging, more emerging markets, like, you got to highlight India and parts of Latin America, where COVID is still, and other parts of Southeast Asia outside of India, where COVID is still a really big problem, even, bigger than it had been prior. The support, it feels like we're back at day one in the way it was in the United States in March and April of a year ago, 2020. It's really supporting those employees and their families. It's a humanitarian crisis, and that's first and foremost. So we're doing a lot of expediting of different, products and services to those markets, and working with governments, both the U.S. government and I'll use India as an example, the Indian government. I'm on a task force that was organized by the White House to help. So it feels like back in the early days of like I said, 2020. I don't know fully why India didn't go through that experience back then, and they're going through it now. There's different theories, but nonetheless, it's a real humanitarian crisis, and it affects obviously the people on the ground in India, but also in an engineering company like ours, there's a lot of employees and leaders of Indian descent, and so it's a very sensitive topic, and I haven't talked to an Indian employee that doesn't have a family member or close friend that lives back in India that hasn't been impacted. So right now it's an all hands on deck to get them supplies, ventilators, oxygenators, and ultimately vaccines. And we're working with, various other companies, the U.S. government, other governments, and of course the Indian government to make this happen. And so that's taken up a lot of time over the last couple of weeks. And then you've got some places like in the, on the other extreme, like China, that are like the U.S. that are fully, returned. And then you've got like Europe, I'd say, is in the middle, or it's closer to the United States. I think it just hit this inflection point that we hit in U.S. a few weeks ago, or a month or two ago on vaccines, where enough people are gotten vaccinated, and you feel the momentum coming back in Western Europe. So with Western Europe, the support we're providing is some of the lessons learned, that we learned in the U.S. is once you hit that inflection point, things move fast. And I hope that's what's going to happen in Europe.
Have you required anything internally at Medtronic vaccination wise? Have you communicated anything to employees?
Oh yeah. So we've again, we have to work with the different jurisdictions around the world. In the U.S., it's by state, and we've worked with various countries all over the map. Our team's done a great job at working with the governments to procure vaccines for our employees and their family members and the community in some cases. And we're doing, vaccinations out of our facilities. Again, working with the local authorities to get these vaccines, and it's been great. I mean, our employees and their families are very grateful for it, and the communities too. I mean, like in India, for example, we're trying to get vaccines to our Indian employees, but we've kind of, agreed to this kind of 1 to 3 or, 1 to 4 ratio for every employee we vaccine 3 in the community. So, we're trying to make this, good for our employees, but also for the communities that they're in.
Do you have a threshold in mind, a vaccination rate of employees that you want to reach or hit?
I think it's in line with what you're hearing. Like it did take the U.S. I mean, we're hoping to get into the 70s, and I haven't gotten an update recently on the percentages, but it seems to be going pretty quickly. But like, given how many employees we have in Medtronic, say it's 100,000 ish, and a good portion of those in the United States, call it 40, 50,000. It starts to reflect what you're seeing in the country, right? You've got it. So we'll probably mirror the United States, maybe a little higher end because of being a healthcare company and a little closer to it. There's maybe a bias to trust the science. And, so maybe it's a little higher than what you're seeing in the United States. But so far I almost every employee I've talked to has, been vaccinated.
I swear I didn't want to go down the COVID rabbit hole, but once you start talking about it, there's so many questions. But it's been a big part of your first year as CEO, and I wanted to sort of talk about that. Both we'll talk operationally in a moment, but just personally, this is your first CEO role. What is different about being the CEO? What are the positives, and have you identified anything? I don't want to say negatives, but any challenges perhaps that you'd rather be without?
There's a lot of positives. I mean, being a CEO of a company of any size, especially a large one like an iconic company like Medtronic that's in healthcare, it's humbling to see. You get a really a bird's eye view of just, and I think this is a healthcare comment for certain, a Medtronic comment, how dedicated people are to healthcare and helping other people's lives, and how seriously they take that and how hard they work every day. And it's very inspiring to see that. I think one thing I've learned over the last year, and COVID's really helped that, is when you got the resources available to you of a company like Medtronic, and scientific capabilities, clinical capabilities, technology, balance sheet, financing, relationships with physicians. I've started to think bigger, in terms of what we could and should be doing. And, for sure, in the healthcare side, we take great pride in that we impact the lives of 2 patients every second. That sounds like a lot. Every second, 2 patients, it adds up to roughly 80 million people a year. But then I started to think about that 80 million is just a small fraction of the world's population. And we tend to deal with the sicker people that need a cardiac device or a surgical procedure. And I do think that 80 million should go to 800 million. And we should be much more ubiquitous, given the advancements in technology and the role that we could play in healthcare to really, and a lot of it is this miniaturization of electronics and longer batteries, data and AI, and all these things. I really think we could get that 800 million in a reasonable period of time, 800 million of patients versus 80 million. And so that is I've really started to think about how the challenge is, how do you run the company day to day to hit, the goals we need to hit and keep everybody happy, but also have these, I wouldn't just call them aspirations, but, real goals to really transform the company, transform healthcare. So that to me, is, been the biggest, I think most exciting thing that, I'm dealing with right now, is just once inspired every day by seeing these employees do what they do, and our customer, our partners, the physicians in the hospitals, and 2, just this opportunity to transform healthcare, given what we have. In terms of the other side of the ledger is, every conversation that you're in, every meeting that you're in, people are really watching what you say and what you do, and every kind of mannerism. And so you really need to be on your game, every day, in terms of, you be a positive outlook, be patient, but have a sense of urgency, but be patient, be optimistic, but pragmatic, to have a lot of energy, to have that personal touch. And, I've had to learn, to kind of, I wouldn't say radically change my life, but could get better at, kind of managing my energy and and being disciplined so that every day I am in that mode. And you've got to make trade-offs in your personal life that sometimes are difficult. You want to go, visit some friends for the weekend or this, and sometimes you just can't do that because you've got to use the weekend to kind of really rejuvenate and also sometimes just think, because you're going from, event to event during the week. And that kind of a lifestyle can be a little exhausting. So I wouldn't say it's definitely not a positive. I don't know if it's a negative, but I got to learn to deal with it. And I've gotten better, but I'm still working on that.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I can relate to that, doing a podcast and interviewing people all week. By the end of the week, you can be exhausted. Yeah. I had a thought and it just slipped out of my head. Hold on.
But like things that we talked about, like before getting on, things that I've learned to do, like, we talked about before we got on the show here, hockey and, still playing, men's league hockey. And, it sounds silly, but that hour, this weekend was an hour and 15 minutes, and I was praying for that Zamboni guy to open the door. I was so gassed. But that really, it's a different type of exercise. It's a real release, and that's what I'm talking. It's part of my recovery process, and kind of getting that recovery process, that rejuvenation process, both physically and mentally, is something that you really have to get good at, and you have to be consistent with.
But I was going to say, there's a lot of CEOs, I think, to counter that, maybe they withdraw, at least publicly, and they don't say as much publicly. You've put yourself out there, and I dare say you've inspired others to do that. We've got the Medtronic Talks podcast. I don't think that doesn't happen if you don't put yourself out there and communicate. Get the videos on the investor relations calls. I mean, you're really making a point of maybe you're being more careful as to how you communicate, but you're not dialing back on that communication at all.
No, I mean, I think look, what great organizations do is they lay out I think an ambitious or bold vision. They tell you what they're going to do, and then they go do it, and they update you along the way. So I do think it's important to communicate. And these different communications, whether they be the earnings calls or podcasts like this, or a lot of internal, communications, I know various audiences, even though it might be geared to one audience, is listening. They're listening, and it's a way to move the organization forward, and the ecosystem around us that's important is to kind of set out that inspiring, ambitious vision, and then along the way, update people and call balls and strikes. Mm-hmm. Like I said on our earnings call, here's where we're winning share and here's where we're losing share. And, I think it's, everybody wants to be on the winning side. No one wants to be on the losing side, but we've got to be clear with people. And look, the other thing is, if you're going to accomplish something great, you got to be ambitious about it, and you've got to be you got to make yourself vulnerable. So you've got to, put yourself out there, and you got to, sometimes it doesn't always work out. You have hiccups along the way, and you've got to own those and be straight with people, and don't try to sugarcoat it. And I think that gets you, support and credibility, and it's liberating, to be honest with you. So yeah, we have stepped up the communication quite a bit, and I'm hoping that anticipating that will continue and evolve. And
I noted that in the call, and I advise everyone who wants to balls and strikes and to see all the numbers. You do a great job with that presentation, and they can get that on that presentation. But you did identify those businesses that perhaps, I don't want to say disappointed, but that could do better. And you identified competitors who grabbed some market share from you, or places where you lost some market share because of them. So I don't know if that's always done on these calls, but I
had a few board members call me and say, "You sure you want to call competitors out like that?" I'm like, we're not necessarily calling them out. It's not bad mouthing or trash talking. It's just, look, we tend to use the word competitor. I'm like, well, in this case, throw out, we lost share to Boston Scientific, and this other case, we gained share from Axonics, whatever. And it's not meant to be negative. It's clarity and honesty.
That's how that's interesting. You got that call, but I took it that way as well. So, or took it as honesty. And one thing you talked about, and I do want to get into the businesses, but this is a great conversation. Your focus on market share. You said this will be the upcoming fiscal year will be the first time you count market share gains, and I presume losses as well.
Unfortunately. There are some of those.
In calculating compensation. That makes it very real for employees. How difficult it was to come up with a metric that measures it correctly. And maybe it's super simple, I don't know. And
no, it's not.
And are you just looking at dollars generated? Are you looking at lives touched? Are there other sort of factors when you come up with the market share?
Yeah, well, look, in some cases we've got really granular and accurate data. In some of our markets, us and our competitors years ago, way before me, and have agreed to submit their data to an independent third party, like an accounting firm, like a Deloitte or somebody. And then that firm publishes that data on it. And so we know what the overall market's doing, and then we know what our piece is, so we can tell if we gained or lost share. And so there we can be very specific. In other cases, we're triangulating, and it's very difficult, right? We're reading earnings reports, triangulating our data with earnings reports from other companies who have various numbers grouped together, and we've got to splice them apart. So it's not exact, but you can get a trend at least, and you can see a trend. And so I've asked the team, don't get so caught up in precision, get the general trend. And just going through this exercise has been helpful. The other thing I'd say, Tom, is we are looking at, very unique cases. So we may, for our cardiac rhythm business, measure it one way, but for our spine business, measure it another way, just based on the availability of data, based on what we're trying to talk. Again, this is internally for us. It's not meant to be some, audited number. It's like, okay, but it's as precise as we can get it. And it's as contextual as we can get it, right? In some cases, it's units. Some cases, it's dollars. Some cases, we're looking for more of an improvement trend quarter over quarter. In other cases, more year over year. So we'll see. This will be our first year. And just this last year, learning how to track it better and talking about it, and then debating it internally, even arguing, over, okay, what's the best way? It's been a learning, and the idea here is to really get the organization focused on it. And one of the other challenges is just the messaging around it. One share of like market growth versus is way more important than one share of market share growth, really. I mean, one point is growing the market's more important. So this doesn't take our focus off starting new markets and growing. It's an and. It's like, look, you need to grow the market, but you also need to, be competitive, and it's an and, not an or, and kind of getting that message across that, hey, look, we're not just shifting from a innovation-driven company that's really focused on market development, which is what Medtronic, I think, really separates the company. Like, starting different segments. Hopefully, a new one will start as renal denervation for hypertension. That's a new one we'll start and leading these markets. That's what Medtronic's known for. That's what it's awe-inspiring to just watch that process play out. We're not moving away from that. We're just saying once we open up these markets and start to grow them, we need to build, keep that share for longer. Or when conversely, like we're entering a new market with surgical robotics and we're competing against Intuitive, we want to, really partly measure ourselves, again, market growth, because there's a lot of market growth there more than anything, but also, how we're doing against the competition there. So it's both.
And I'm glad you hit upon those two. I was going to get to them later, but let's bring it up now. With robotics, how does the Mazer rollout, or your Mazer business, has that helped inform what you're doing with Hugo? You brought that up in the call that you mentioned some of the successes you have with Mazor, rather. Is it comparable to Hugo? Does it help you sort of lay out a plan for rolling that out, or is it completely different?
Well, it is quite different, because you're in spine, we were, us and Globus are the first two with there may be others that are calling themselves robots, but these two seem to be the leading ones. And it was new for spine surgeons. So we were earlier on there, in blazing that trail. And so the spine surgeons weren't as discerning because this was the first robot they had. So it's not quite the same versus in surgery. Da Vinci's been out there for 20 years or something like that. So the surgeons have, and the sophistication of robotics has evolved for quite a bit longer there. So there's not an exact analog, but there's definitely some lessons learned. I mean, we learned, how to think about going to market. Like this is a big commercial capital equipment purchase. So you have it's a certain skill to sell a piece of capital like that to a hospital. You get into the budgeting process, the C-suite. It's a big $1 million plus purchase. Then you need to have there's a lot of training that goes. And so you have to have a certain training sales force at the beginning. It's a little more hypercare model, as we call it, until the surgical team is up and running, and then you have the maintenance. So how to think about go to market and how to think about different acquisition models. There's a lot of lessons learned that are going to help. And so for sure, the Mazor experience is going to help us on the surgical robot side. But I don't want to make it out to be it's exactly the same, because it's definitely not. There's quite a bit of differences. There's a lot more. One thing, the business models, I think there's a little bit more. There might be some more flexibility in spine because you've got so many more, consumables per procedure. I mean, the spine cases, there's a lot more, value in the consumables than an average general surgery case. That gives you different options on business models that are a little bit more difficult in surgery, but definitely it's informing us. And we're using the scale of our maintenance business that came from our neuroscience area, because not just robots, we got imaging, like the O-arm, we've got navigation. So that service organization, we're going to leverage region by region to help with our robotics maintenance. So there are some synergies as well.
Two more questions. Renal denervation, obviously you don't have the approval yet, but you're anticipating hopefully that some exciting news in the fall at TCT if you have clinical results. What are you doing now to prepare? Are you doing anything now to prepare for a commercial rollout? And is it are you starting from scratch with that sort of rollout? Because it's such an innovative technology. What goes into building that kind of business? Well,
you first of all, given that it's a new concept, right? I think the marketing of it needs to be different, right? It's not like it's a whole new concept, a hypertension therapy that's device related. I mean, people are thinking about hypertension. They think about, change my diet and exercise, take some pills, a pharma regimen, but some sort of med device procedure, with a catheter. And, this seems crazy. So, we're going to have to, we can't rely on, in this case, the United States, the interventionalist here, the interventional cardiologist. I think the marketing job, we need to kind of work with them on and go direct to the patient to drive awareness. So we've been building that muscle of how to go direct to patient to drive awareness of what, the benefits of this therapy exists, the benefits of it, and then build the referral pathway from that, that consumer who could be a patient into the healthcare system through their primary care and or cardiologist, and eventually get to that interventional cardiologist. So that we're working on, the direct patient marketing, as well as the referral pathway, which is something unique that in the past, if you think about it, even with a new therapy, a lot of the times the concept is out there and the referral pathway is set. It's just a new mousetrap. Here, this is a whole new concept without the referral pathway. So that's probably the biggest thing. And then reimbursement. Even, we're working with different commercial payers and CMS on reimbursement.
Okay. And perhaps the final question, I know you have to go. Last week you had the decision or the announcement about HeartWare. What went into the decision to stop selling HeartWare, and how is that calculation done? Can you just give us a little color on that process?
Well, sure. This was one. I mean, there's, just for context, there's two. These are very sick patients. There's two therapies out there today. Two left ventricular assist device. One from Abbott and one from Medtronic. Both companies purchased these smaller companies years ago, and there was a growing body of evidence that what really drove the decision is a growing body of evidence that Abbott's device was better for patients. We got some new data to show that it's in the process of being published, that our device has a higher neurological events, higher incidence of neurological events, including stroke, and a higher mortality. And on top of that, we've had some performance issues with the device. But the bigger issue for us was that there's an alternative, and that alternative in Abbott's device, had lower rates, and the rates were different enough that we just felt it was better for patients. So it goes straight to the heart of Medtronic's mission-driven focus. I mean, we're disappointed we couldn't address some of these issues. It's a complicated therapy. We couldn't get it to where we wanted to, but the path was uncertain and the time was too long and so we decided to, in the name of better patient care, to make this decision. And financially it's not it's a hit, but we can absorb it. It was in our guidance, from our earnings call, because we kind of anticipated something like this. But look, our reputation is the most important thing here at Medtronic, and our mission, and this is the right thing for patients.
Was there any external review that went along with that, or was this all internal, all Medtronic sort of analyzing the data and coming up with conclusions?
Oh, no. We wouldn't make a decision like this alone normally. I mean, we work with the FDA. We work with independent physician group as well. That again, when I say it's independent, they're in this space. But not tied into Medtronic, and they provide us independent thoughts. And so we work with both hand in hand. And as a matter of fact, we showed the FDA, some of the data that we knew was coming, that was, emerging. And so, the FDA was working with us. And then ultimately, if you notice, there was a timing with Abbott, they released a press release saying that they could handle the extra volume, working with Abbott to make sure that they were prepared as well. Alerting them, and giving them some time to be prepared. So again, we tried to make this as little a patient impact as possible, and make sure that we had all the right decision makers around the table, because there are trade-offs, and you're down to one therapy here, at least for the next several years. But we thought that the trade-off, when I say we, collectively, all the people we consulted with and the organizations, this is the right decision.
Great. I don't want to take any more of your time. I appreciate it, Geoff. Great. Thank you for joining us on the podcast.
All right. Thanks, Tom. Good talking to you, as always.
All right, Chris Newmarker. How can folks find you out there in social media land?
Hey, I'm on LinkedIn, Chris Newmarker, just like a new marker. And you can find me on Twitter at Newmarker. Always happy to chat with people.
And I am on Twitter at medtech Tom. I am on LinkedIn. You can find me, Tom Salemi, Salemi. And please do connect with us on social media, and please do share this podcast on those social media channels. And when you do, make sure you tag Chris and or myself so we can be part of those excellent conversations. If you have not subscribed yet to this podcast, you can do so on Apple Podcasts. You can do it on Google, Amazon, Spotify, all the major ones. You can also find our Medtronic Talk series there as well. Subscribing is easy. And when you subscribe, you get these episodes first. And who doesn't want to be first, Chris? I mean, really.
That's right.
Who wants to be second? Who wants to be last? Come on.
That's right.
Be first.
That's right.
What do you like to scream,
Fortune
Chris?
Favors the brave.
That wasn't what I was thinking, but fortune does favor the brave. Well, I thought it was the bold.
The bold, whatever. It's
one of those two.
Yeah. Don't take your Latin expertise and beat me over that with it.
I'm going to go to Google right after this podcast to find out which one of us is right. That's it, folks. Tune in next time. We'll have another great episode of the Device Talks weekly podcast waiting for you.
Hey, enjoy the summer. If you haven't already, get vaccinated soon.